Okay, welcome back to Conker Rants. Today I'm going to talk about a console that's a little bit more obscure, and is also sort of related to things going on in gaming right now, as it was a very expensive console on launch. And I guess that kind of relates to what PlayStation is currently doing. Anyways, today we're going to be talking about the 3DO, the Panasonic 3DO to be specific, because this is the version I own. It's an FZ1. It's probably, I guess, the most common version. It's the one that you see the most if you search 3DO. Is probably the one that'll show up first. The FC10 I used to own as well, which is like the top loading one. It has like a door, like a PlayStation kind of deal. And this one is front loading. But yeah, it was kind of like a premium console for its time because it came out around, during Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo era. And the 3DO company was a company created by Trip Hawkins. He was a head over at EA Games, and he went and created a separate company called 3DO. And they had a plan to create consoles, essentially, and put them into a market kind of like VHS players or DVD players, in that they had the schematics for how to make a console and what things needed to be in it for it to be a 3DO console, a real 3DO console. And basically other companies would produce these consoles. So you had Gold Sarah made a version, and Sanyo made a version, and Panasonic made several versions. And it was a console that was around for a while. There are many different versions. I'm sure there's more than that probably you can look up. But I just wanted to give a little bit of the backstory on it. Eventually, obviously, he had EA's backing for this company as well, and EA made a lot of games for this and ported a lot of games to this console. And they eventually pulled out and kind of kicked him out of the company. So, yeah. So the 3DO was a console. It was very expensive on launch. I'm not sure the exact price, but like it's pretty comparable. Like when you go to say like a Sega Genesis that was like $200 or $130, and the SNES was the same thing, and then this console was probably like double, triple that. It's a 32-bit console. It has a very good library. It always gets a bad rap for being like an FMV console, kind of like the Sega CD does, a lot. And even though those FMV games do exist on it, and they are higher quality than Sega CD, definitely by like a large margin. It's not the majority of games on it. Like the majority of games on it are either PC ports. There's some games that are exclusive or were exclusive when they came out, and eventually came to PC and other consoles, especially after its failure. But yeah, so I guess I'm just going to talk about my little bit of history with it, and that is that I seen a commercial for this console when I was a kid on TV, and I remember thinking, man, that looks like so good, because it had like games that were 3D, and at the time, no games were 3D. It was 32-bit, like that's double the bits, that's crazy when you're a kid. All that marketing talk, really. I mean, it's real, but it's marketing talk. So yeah, I'll just talk about a little bit about a few of the games, I guess. So you can basically play games from any region. In fact, like many other consoles in that debate, it's a lot cheaper to buy Japanese versions of games just because like they're in jewel cases and they're much cheaper. So, a lot of my games are going to be those versions. So we can talk about Hideo Kojima had 2 games on this. I think one was exclusive for the time, which was Policenauts. This is just the pilot disc, which is like a demo, but Policenauts. And Snatcher had a port on 3DO as well. That's pretty good. What else we got? We got Total Eclipse is a really good game. It's a Crystal Dynamics game. It's kind of like a forward, like behind the ship space shooter, with 3 polygon graphics and like 2D assets. So like your ship is 2D, and like a lot of the enemies are 2D, but not all of them. And yeah, it's kind of like a mix of both, but it's a really nice looking game and it's fun to play. I would highly recommend it. I think you can get it for PlayStation too. I'm not sure. Captain Quasar is a Studio 3DO game, so it's like an in-house game. This is kind of like a twin stick shooter without the twin sticks, I guess, because it's like an isometric shooter where you walk around as Captain Quasar and shoot enemies. It's also co-op, so it's really fun to play with your friends. I played this with my best friend many times. We have Killing Time, another Studio 3DO game. This also came out on PC. I'm not sure if it came out at the same time on PC, but I know it is now. It doesn't have the highest frame rate on this console, unfortunately, which is kind of the bad part, but it is definitely very playable, and it's a really good first-person shooter. So if you're interested in those kinds of games, like, this is really great. It's like horror infused to a certain degree, because it's kind of like a haunted mansion kind of style, but also they integrate full motion video actors kind of like green screened into the first person thing. So like a lot of the cutscenes happen in game, but they're full motion video. So it's really cool. It's a cool like little design that they did at that time. And as you'll notice, a lot of these games that I have on these are the Japanese versions. That's why they're in jewel cases, because I'm pretty sure they just came in jewel cases and that was it, which is kind of the norm for games from that era. The next game we're going to talk about is Road Rash. Road Rash is a great racing game, racing combat game, I guess you could say. They were definitely good games on the Sega Genesis, as well as this version, which is kind of a remake of the first one, I guess. It's like very 90s, like extremely 90s. It even has Soundgarden on the soundtrack and a bunch of other grunge alternative bands. It's a great game. Like, it has 3D racing environments, so like all of the racetracks are in 3D. While the bikes are obviously like 2D assets that are like scanned in, kind of like a Mortal Kombat style. But it looks really great for its time, and it's a really great game. You can play it for PlayStation 2, but the 3DO version, I would say, still is the best version of this game, in my opinion. We got a 2D platformer, Gex, which is a mascot that went on to have 3 games after this, right? Because he had like Enter the Gecko and Gex 3D. I don't know, there's a bunch. But the first game is 2D. Very good mascot, slightly annoying, kind of funny. Like, not as bad as Bubsy, for sure. Like, Gex is definitely a game worth playing, and if you like 2D platformers, I would definitely recommend this one. Now, we get to the North American release games that I actually have complete in box. And you'll see why they were more expensive here, and still are. Because they're in these gigantic cases. These cases are obnoxious, in my opinion. Like, Sega CD and Saturn and like original PlayStation cases are already obnoxiously big, but like when you open this one up and look at it, it's actually crazy. Like, there's enough room for 2 CDs here, which I guess was intended, and maybe to be able to put a manual on top, but the manuals are just as big as the cases. So like, they're huge cases, and they have these kind of cardboard foldovers. So they're kind of like PlayStation cases, but not really. That game is Draxon's Revenge. That's a sequel to Stellar 7, which was a PC game, and I think was also on Sega CD as well. Very good kind of like on-plane space shooter game. This is a Mercenary. This is kind of like a really weird cyberspace game. It's definitely very 90s, like with the cyberspace internet references and stuff like that, but definitely a worth a play, I would say. This is Syndicate. This is a pretty well-known Bullfrog Games game from Electronic Arts. It's a strategy game, definitely worth playing. You can get it on PC. I'm pretty sure it's on Steam. So if you really want to play the game, you don't want to play it on 3DO, understandable. You can play it there. But yeah, definitely a really good game. Space Hulk. So I think this is in the Warhammer series, right? I think they re-released this like maybe 5 or 6 years back and remastered it. Very good game. It's kind of a first-person shooter, but it's like a turn-based-ish kind of thing. It's more like a strategy game, really, but it's a really good game. Definitely play. An excellent port of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. The only thing that is really wrong with this port, in my opinion, is there's no parallax scrolling in the backgrounds. But the gameplay is amazing. The sprites are huge. All the pixel art is amazing looking. It's a really good version of this game. If you have a 3DO and you can get your hands on this copy, like, it's definitely worth owning. Just for comparison, because I'm just thinking about it now while I'm doing the video. I'll compare it to a Sega CD case because it's right in front of me. So, Sega CD case, 3DO case. Like, look at that size difference. Like, why did cases ever need to be this big? I get that it was for marketing, and like, you could see this on a shelf much more than, say, like a Sega Genesis game because it stands out because it's so large. But like, it's so stupid. It's so stupidly big, and they're so hard to find in box, especially where I live. So yeah, that's the 3DO. It was a little console that came out. It was like fairly popular. Like, it wasn't horribly selling. And I feel like it maybe sold better in certain parts of the world than others, like any console does. But I would definitely recommend getting one. If you can get one for like a reasonable price and you can collect games, definitely go for like the imports for sure. Especially on games that basically have no dialogue or anything, because it doesn't matter, right? Like, you don't need, if things aren't in English, it doesn't matter if there's no dialogue. So definitely go for those games more. Obviously, if you're doing RPGs or stuff like that, or games that have a lot of dialogue, you're definitely going to want to go for the North American versions. But I would definitely say it's a console worth collecting for. Like I said, if you can get your hands on it, go and grab one, play some of the games. It's not as bad as people say it is. It really isn't. There's a lot of good games for it. I don't own a lot right now. Like, what I own is pretty much what I showed you, as well as a few more imports, like Alone in the Dark. What else? There's a bunch of stuff here. Crash and Burn. Anyways, if you liked the video, like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. People seem to like these videos. I'm going to keep doing them, I guess. I don't know what I'm going to do for the next one, because I'm kind of like just trying to pick consoles that I have a history with. I don't really like just doing only, you know, a console that I'm maybe not associated with at all. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.